which just struck me as odd.
Why did that strike you as odd?
They're different than what the norm is. So, and a lot of times, whether narcotics or whatnot, people's pupils will either dilate or they'll contract.
And what were your observations of the defendant's pupils?
They were almost the size of pins.
And after you observed the defendant and secured the scene, what did you do next?
I just waited and waited for paramedics to show up, and at that time, paramedics showed up and began CPR on the individual.
Did you speak with law enforcement once they arrived on the scene?
Yes.
Did you provide them with a statement?
I did to the highway troopers, yes.
One moment, please, Ron. Nothing further at this time, Your Honor.
Good morning, Agent Daria. How are you, sir?
Good.
It's still morning. Sir, you had an opportunity to talk with my client, or at least observe my client immediately after this accident, correct?
Yes.
And you indicate that his eyes were peculiar because his pupils were small.
Yes.
Okay. What was the lighting condition that day?
It was the middle of the day, so I believe it was midday. I'm not quite sure the exact time.
Was the sun shining?
The sun was out, yes.
Okay. And you're aware that the normal pupil will constrict when in sunlight or high light?
Yes.
So do you have an opinion as to whether or not the light was causing that constriction?
These looked like they were affected more than by just the sunlight. Just general observation and the regular of what people know, it just looked different.
Being a federal agent, do you have any training in the observations or detection of folks under the impairment of alcohol and or drugs?
Yes.
Okay. What are some of the symptoms or signs you look for of impairment when you're evaluating someone to determine whether or not they're high on drugs?
Well, majority of the time it's, the glassy eyes, constriction of the pupils or the dilation of pupils.
Okay. That's the only manifestation that you notice when somebody's impaired?
Right.
You don't notice people who maybe have trouble with their walking?
No.
You don't think that drunk people or high people can have trouble maintaining a focus on a conversation?
They could, yes.
Okay. What about confusion? Do they exhibit confusion?
Yes.
Sometimes drunk people or high people have kind of crazy emotional responses. They cry for no apparent reason. Have you seen that?
I have, yes.
Okay. You've also seen people slurring their words. Has that been something you've been familiar with?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And have you seen people sometimes even have trouble maintaining their balance and stumble and fall?
Yes.
Is my client exhibiting any of those signs?
He was sitting on the berm, and he was not walking when I talked to him and when I observed him.
Okay. So did he appear to have any trouble maintaining his balance or his position on the berm where he was sitting?
I don't believe he wasn't moving.
Did he exhibit any type of giggling or crazy emotional responses?
No, sir.
You indicate that he just seemed, you use the word apathetic.
Yes.
You familiar with how people act when they're in shock?
Occasionally, yes.
Okay. And have you yourself ever been involved in a fatal accident?
Yes.
Okay. Were you the driver of the car that hit that individual?
No, I was responding to a scene.
Okay. So other than your duties in law enforcement, you yourself have never hit anybody and had a tragedy like this occur?
No, sir.
Okay. And that's good news for you, but you really don't know how my client reacts on a normal basis, do you?
No, sir.
Are you also aware that there are certain medications that can cause constriction of the pupils?
Yes, sir.
Are you aware that one of those medications is a drug called methadone in a prescription form?
I was not aware of that, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Officer Dario, did you do a complete workup on the defendant in terms of whether or not he was impaired?
No.
Did you administer any standardized field sobriety tests?
No, ma'am.
Did you complete any drug tests to see the defendant's level of impairment?
No.
Did you do any detailed questioning of the defendant?
No.
What was the extent of your conversation with this defendant?
Just to identify who had caused the accident and to secure the scene.
And Officer Daria, why did you not do this additional testing of the defendant to determine his level of impairment?
It's not part of my regular duties to do that as a federal agent. We enforce federal laws, so that is not my professional duties.
And Agent Daria, while you were on the scene, was this part of your assignment as a federal agent?
No. Well, anytime there's a moment of crisis, I know we are to respond since we are law enforcement, but it's not necessary.
And in regards to the questions you were asked about various signs of impairment, based on your training experience, can every person who is impaired act differently?
Yes.
Do they all have the same response?
No.
Do they all show the exact same indicators?
Absolutely not.
And in fact, you did no sort of evaluation other than your general observations
Correct.
of whether or not this defendant was impaired, correct?
Correct.
One moment. Nothing further, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor. Thank you, Agent.
State calls Anthony McGoff. Anthony.
Mr. George, and you are, through your team, asking if they consent?
Yes, Your Honor, we have asked.
And you're talking with our...
Correct, Your Honor. Yeah. Thank you.
Raise your right hand. You solemnly swear or affirm, subject to the penalties of perjury, that the testimony you're about to give here will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I do. Please be seated.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
State and spell your name, please.
Anthony D. McGhaw, Jr. Last name spelled M-C-G-H-A-W.
And are you licensed in any healthcare field?
I am a certified paramedic in the state of Ohio.
Okay. How long have you held that license?
Since 2006 as a paramedic.
Okay. And where are you currently employed?
City of Cleveland, Division of EMS.
Okay. How long with EMS?
Total 13 years.
I want to direct your attention to events that you found yourself in last September 15th, 2016 on I-90. Do you remember that event?
I do.
Were you working that day at that time?
I was off duty.
Tell us where you were coming from and going to at the time you encountered this crash.
I was coming from home, headed to Michigan I was going to a gun range. I like out in Ann Arbor.
I'm sorry, going to what?
A gun range in Ann Arbor.
Okay. And what vehicle were you driving?
I was driving my personal vehicle.
Can you describe it, please?
2002 Saab,
Color?
beige,
Okay. How many miles on that Saab?
about 170.
Any passengers with you?
No.
I would like you to describe, in your words of your own choosing, how you encountered this event, what lane you were in, the traffic conditions, and what you saw that caused you to stop. Can you do that, please?
Yes. I was headed westbound on I-90, and I was in the far left lane initially. There was a large group of cars that slammed on their brakes, which caused me to move over to the right where there was a clear area. As I moved past the blockages, I saw what appeared to be a man laying in the freeway, injured. I immediately pulled over and began to render care.
Okay. So did you pull to the left berm or the right berm?
I pulled to the left, to the median.
Okay. At the point that you stopped, if you recall, was anyone else already at the side of the man down on the pavement?
I believe there was a woman there. It kind of feels like we both kind of arrived at the same time.
And was she a healthcare provider of some sort?
I do remember there was a nurse there, but it got very hectic, and I really can't remember who was where and what we were doing.
Did your training take over?
It did.
Okay. Tell us what you did.
I assessed the trooper. He had multi-system injuries, bleeding heavily, and a lot of broken bones. I checked for a pulse. Initially, he did have a pulse. He was breathing on his own, but his pulse began to weaken. I called our Red Center at Cleveland to identify that we had an incident, and I just couldn't tell if we were in Lakewood or information exactly where I was and told him I needed assistance.
Okay. And did you get an acknowledgement to your call?
Yes.
Okay. Did you start to render primary first aid?
Yes.
What did you do?
There was a Homeland Security officer who arrived, and I asked him for his trauma bag or his first aid. In it, there was a tourniquet, so I began to apply tourniquets where it was necessary, or where I could find most necessary. And after the trooper lost the pulse, I began CPR.
Okay. How many tourniquets do you recall applying?
2,
And do you recall where?
both arms.
And can you describe why that was necessary?
He was bleeding heavily. What it appeared, he was having an arterial bleeding, which is the fastest way to lose the large amounts of blood. So that needed immediate attention, especially if I was to continue effective CPR.
So pulse became weak and thready.
Yes,
You started CPR.
yes.
Was anyone assisting you with CPR at that point, if you recall?
There was a nurse there. I took over compressions. I was actually had his blood on me, and I remember telling her to not actually get involved with the CPR because I was already contaminated. She wasn't yet.
Okay. Fair to say your attention's focused on the person that you're trying to render aid to?
Yes.
Okay. Was from the point you reached him, did you ever see any signs of awareness or consciousness?
Not consciousness, no.
Okay. And that would that also then rule out awareness?
Yes.
Okay. Any voluntary movements occurring when you reached him?
Everything was involuntary. The movement that I did see and the style of breathing that he was actually doing, it was all involuntary.
Okay. Are you familiar with the medical term agonal breathing?
That's correct.
First of all, define your understanding of the term.
It is substandard breathing at a very slow rate. We call it a death rate. It's not adequate for life.
Okay. Did you see agonal breathing?
I did.
If you know, how long did you continue with CPR until an ambulance arrived?
It felt like 4 or 5 minutes.
Okay. At some point, did you surrender primary first aid to another first aid responder?
Yes, I believe the Lakewood agency arrived first, and they began care, or they took care over. They definitely had the necessary equipment to take over.
Okay, so you stepped back.
Yes.
Do you recall what you did at that point?
There was the driver. I went to go check on the driver of the other vehicle, the vehicle that struck.
Could you see a vehicle with any damage?
I don't recall the damage to the vehicle.
Okay. Well, say you're referring to a driver.
Yes.
So, in the context of this scenario, are you concerned about a driver that would have hit the trooper?
That's correct.
Okay. Were you able to locate that driver?
I did.
How and where?
He was also on the median, on the inside lane. He was standing with another man who identified him as the driver. I asked if he was okay.
Did he respond?
He did.
What did he say?
He said he was okay. That's not verbatim, but the impression that he left me was that he was okay. He seemed
Go ahead.
He seemed startled, a bit out of sorts, considering the gravity of the situation.
Sure.
I did observe that he had pinpoint pupils.
And so, how close are you standing to him?
In handshaking distance.
Okay, so if I approach you in this fashion, stop me at the distance.
About there.
Okay. Lighting conditions were good?
Yes.
Midday?
Yes.
You're looking into his eyes like we're doing right now.
That's correct.
When you say pinpoint pupils, what does that physically describe? And then we'll talk about what it means to you.
Physically, it's kind of very noticeable. It just seems out of sorts or unnatural for pupils to be that kind of closed. Medically, it does mean that there is some opiate use.
In your experience as a licensed EMT with the state of Ohio, have you seen patients with pinpoint pupils in opiate situations?
I have.
So you're familiar with this visual aspect of pinpoint pupils?
Very.
Okay. Have you attended overdoses?
Many.
In your range of experience, does an opiate user's pupils always constrict to pinpoints, or how might they behave?
Heavy usage indicates the size of the constriction. The more the usage, the smaller the diameter.
Now, as a trained EMT, do you have to observe that in order to factor in if you're going to administer any medications treating someone?
It is part of the assessment, yes.
Okay. And why is that?
It gives us an indication as what the cause of the overdose could be.
Okay. And if it's a trauma patient, and if the hospital says we'll administer a pain med or something like that, do you need to advise the hospital that, well, hold on a second, you need to be aware of this?
We will advise the hospital of all treatments that we will render, yes.
I mean, you don't want to cause an overdose of somebody who's already on opiates by administering something that will compound medically with what they've got in their system, right?
That is correct.
Okay. So, you make this observation, pinpoint pupils. Anything else in terms of demeanor along these lines of opiate use that you saw?
The out of sorts nature or his behavior matched with the pinpoint pupils.
Why do you say that?
Well, it's based on hypoxia. Hypoxia is a state of lack of oxygen. Opiate use causes a slower respiration, which means less oxygen in the body, which can cause a out of sorts type of behavior. It all goes together.
Fair to say people under the influence of an opiate can exhibit a range of behaviors.
That's correct.
What would you describe the range as being?
Very relaxed to unresponsive, and on the opposite range, after given Narcan, we've experienced some violence or agitation, combative nature. So there's a whole host in between the extremes.
And then, in this scenario that we're talking about, where we're presuming that the individual you're describing was behind the wheel of the vehicle that struck the trooper, could they themselves have been injured in that collision?
Possibly.
Okay. Could they have possibly had a head strike on either the sun visor, the forward roof of the car, the steering wheel, things of that nature?
That is correct.
Okay. Did you observe any bruising or injury to the face of the individual with the pinpoint pupils?
I do not recall.
Okay. Did he complain of any such injury?
Not that I recall, no.
Okay. Other than his emotional affect, his demeanor, was he conversant with you when you were talking with him? Did he answer in a timely fashion or not? Can you describe that?
He did answer. He appeared to be a bit distracted from answering.
Okay. How far were you physically from where the trooper's body was at the median with the driver, if you recall?
15, 20 feet.
Okay, so fairly close.
About the same distance that you are now.
So fair to say the condition of the trooper on the pavement is right there in the immediate area?
That's correct.
Okay. Have you ever seen someone in shock?
Yes.
Tell us about what types of shock you're familiar with.
Shock under the guise of disbelief, stress, and disorientation.
Okay. So the first one, disbelief, is more of an emotional state.
That's correct.
Okay. But there's also a medical state of shock, correct?
There is.
Okay. How do you tell the difference?
Well, medically, shock is indicated by a low blood pressure. Again, the blood pressure is low, oxygenation could be low, and that could cause a misbehavior.
Okay. Did you observe the driver with the pinpoint pupils' body motions at all? At any point when you were with him, did he ambulate? Did he walk? Did he stand or sit or anything like that?
He was standing the whole time that I saw him. He didn't appear to have an unsteady gait or the inability to not stand still, at least from my observation in the short time that I've talked with him.
Did he say anything about any personal sensations or feelings of injury or what his condition was? Other than the general statement of, and you're paraphrasing, I'm okay.
I don't recall.
Okay.
I did write a statement.
I understand. I'm going to review that with you in a second, okay? So you make this observation, pinpoint pupils. Did that concern you, that you made a note of it and conveyed it to anyone else that came onto the scene?
I did.
All right. First of all, why did it concern you?
It appeared with the out of sorts behavior with the pinpoint pupils that he was under some influence, and because law enforcement was there, I notified them.
Okay. Do you remember how that occurred, where you notified law enforcement? If you can, I know there were many law enforcement that arrived.
Yes.
Do you know which agency you dealt with?
I believe I told Lakewood police, who also were on scene, but I definitely told state troopers.
Okay. So at least twice?
Yes.
Okay. And as you sit here today, do you know the names of the law enforcement individuals, either from Lakewood or the patrol that you spoke with?
I do not.
Okay. Do you remember what your words were when you first spoke to the Lakewood officer?
I believe I told her I believed that the driver was under the influence of opiate usage.
Okay, you just used a gender reference. You said her.
Yes.
Okay. Describe this female officer.
Tall, female officer. I don't know how further, that she was a Caucasian woman.
Okay. Is she in blue or gray?
Blue.
Okay. So Lakewood?
Yes.
Okay. Or CPD possibly. Or do you know?
That was, I remember her specifically, it was Lakewood.
Okay. All right. And did she acknowledge hearing what you said to her?
She did.
Did she take a note of it?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. All right. And how long after you left the driver did you convey that information to the female Lakewood officer?
Almost immediately after the driver indicated that he was okay, is when I contacted somebody, said, hey, this guy, can you take a look at him?
So this was an immediate concern to you?
Yes.
Not casual, not afterthought?
No.
Primary concern at that moment?
That's correct.
Okay. Tell us what your memory is of then approaching any trooper on the same subject.
The same manner. It's just a matter of who was going to handle the situation. I wanted both agencies to understand, like, this is a situation.
Okay. Do you remember conversing with a trooper on this subject?
I remember conversing with a trooper, yes.
And do you remember what you said to the trooper?
Not verbatim.
Okay. Was it on this subject, though?
It was.
And do you know if the trooper took note of your conversation as you were giving it to him?
He did.
And can you describe that trooper by race?
White male. Maybe 5'10", 6 foot.
Okay. You ultimately gave a written statement, correct?
Yes.
You recall to?
I gave the statement to state troopers.
Okay. And do you remember when that was?
It was moments after the injured trooper was taken to the hospital. There was, I want to say about 15, 20 minutes of, I can't say downtime, but there was inactivity in that moment. And then that's when the statement began getting written and that whole thing.
Right. So from what I hear you saying, the medical emergency has left the scene.
That's correct.
The ambulance is left, but then we still have a scene, and now we're going to do scene description, and you're waiting for those people to show up.
Exactly.
Okay. Do you remember everything that you wrote in your statement as you sit here today?
Do I remember everything I wrote in the statement?
Yes.
For the most part, yes.
Okay. And did you review it prior to taking the stand here today?
Not yet, no.
Okay. Tell me the parts that you think you remember.
I remember describing how I arrived at the scene, what I saw at the scene with the trooper being down, the care that I rendered, and the observation that I made with the driver with the pinpoint pupils and off behavior.
Okay. And do you recall writing just a narrative portion of the statement where you're using your own words?
Yes, I was using my own words.
And then was there a follow-up page or pages of Q&A, question and answer?
It sounds familiar. I can't really be certain.
Okay. Do you recall documenting any words of the driver with the pinpoint pupil in your written statement?
I believe I did.
Okay. And you sit there right now. Do you know what they were?
I do not.
If you saw your statement, would it refresh your recollection?
It would.
Your Honor.
Yes, you may approach.
Thank you. I'm showing you states 1458. Take a moment. I'll represent that that's your statement. Review it, please.
Thomas, what number was that?
1458, I believe.
Review the whole thing.
Yes, the whole thing.
I'm having a lot of difficulty reading the question and answer part. It's just
Do you need some Costco cheaters, or is it just the print itself?
it's just the print itself. I can't understand
I'll
the
lend you
handwriting.
glasses if you need glasses. The Q&A is not your handwriting.
No, it's not.
The first page is correct.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, let's deal with the first page.
Well, does that refresh your recollection?
My narrative does, yes.
Having had your recollection refreshed, did you document words of the driver with the pinpoint pupil in your
Yes.
statement? What were the words?
I don't know what happened. That's what I documented.
Okay. I don't know what happened.
Yes.
Okay. So, in the context of what you've already given us in your testimony, when did that statement occur?
In the midst of talking with the driver.
Okay. Is that upon your first approach, asking, are you okay?
Yes.
did you also recall, or did you also document demeanor or appearance in your written statement?
I described what the driver was wearing.
Okay. Do you recall, I'm not going to give you the words, but it begins with the driver appeared and then you use some terms.
In terms of description,
Yes.
I believe I wrote the driver appears to be a white male.
Okay, that's not what I was, I'm talking about his demeanor, his appearance in terms of his mental state.
I don't remember exactly what I said in the report, but I did write it. It's exactly
If
how
I
I
showed
felt.
you your report again, would that refresh your
Yes.
memory?
Thank you. The driver appeared anxious and a bit confused.
Okay. So, to complete your interaction with the driver with the pinpoint pupils, did you ever actually deliver any primary first aid to him?
Not any care to the driver, no.
Okay. So you never touched his person?
No.
You never bandaged him or anything like that?
I do not recall it, no.
Okay. And you didn't perform any physical exam?
No.
Okay. So this is verbal and visual observation only?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. McGoff.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
My name is John Sin. I'm going to ask you some questions. If I ask you anything you don't understand, you can just ask me to rephrase it. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay. You're a paramedic,
That's correct.
and you've been doing that for 13 years?
That's correct.
Okay. Where do you work, sir?
City of Cleveland, Division of EMS.
Okay. Now, I see you have a City of Cleveland shirt on with a badge. Is that an EMS badge?
That's correct.
Okay. And you work for the fire department? Do you work for the police department, or is EMS its own thing?
The Division of EMS is own entity.
Okay. Are you under another division?
No, we're under the Safety Department. Police, fire, and EMS, we are all under that same banner,
Okay.
different divisions.
Okay. Now, sir, what kind of training did you have to become an EMS?
Extensive. I initially started my training as an EMT through Tri-C. I worked at a few private ambulance companies and made my way to Cleveland EMS. There is a training academy at Cleveland EMS, and there has been some contracting education outside of the division that we went through as well in the training academy.
Okay, so you went to a training academy?
Through the city of Cleveland, yes.
When did you do that?
2005.
Okay, and how long was that academy?
12 weeks.
Okay, so you went to a 12-week school, and then you probably got a lot of job experience?
Well, no. The city of Cleveland provides its own training for already certified EMTs as a new hire process.
Okay.
So I got city training on top of the training that I already had.
What was the training you already had?
It was my EMT certification through Tri-C.
Okay, and what kind of program is that? How long of a program is that?
That is a one semester program,
Okay.
just for that course itself.
Okay. So, although it's pretty extensive, you would agree it's not quite as extensive as that as a medical doctor would have?
That is correct.
Okay, and you don't consider yourself a medical doctor?
No, I do not.
You don't consider yourself an expert in the area of pharmacy or medical diagnosis other than as it relates to emergency care?
Can you say that question one more time?
Slowly.
Yes. Would you consider yourself an expert in the area of, let's say, toxology and pharmacy?
I would not use the word expert.
Okay. Do you have any training in those areas?
We have some training.
Okay.
It is a broad training, but I can't say expert.
What about any training in the diagnosis of individuals under the impairment of drugs and or alcohol?
Again, I can't say expert. Heavily trained, yes, but not expert.
You're on the front lines of this opiate epidemic we're having, right?
Indeed.
And on a regular basis, folks on heroin are ODing left and right out there.
That is correct.
And one of the signs that you observe on folks with heroin is that they may have constricted pupils.
That is correct.
Okay. Are you aware that there are certain medications that will also cause the constriction of pupils?
That is correct.
Are you aware that methadone is one of those such medications?
Yes, sir.
Okay, have you had the opportunity to treat folks who are under the influence of heroin?
Yes, I have.
Okay. And what about folks who are taking prescribed methadone?
Yes.
Different demeanors?
The same symptoms for the most part. Delayed respirations, sluggish behavior at times, definitely lethargy. It depends on what level and concentration of the usage.
Well, I'm going to ask you is now, are you aware that the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration sets out guidelines for folks to actually recognize whether or not somebody's under the impairment of certain drugs?
I do not.
Objection to the approach.
Yes.
You had an opportunity to observe my client,
Yes.
and you indicated that it
Counsel,
was...
I'm not.
Sorry about that.
Thank you. All right, go ahead.
The limit should be out. Master.
Sir, you had an opportunity to observe my client immediately after this accident, right?
Yes.
And you indicated that it was his pinpoint pupils and the fact that he was acting out of sorts that led you to believe that he may be under the impairment of an opiate.
That's correct.
I'm going to ask you if you observed any other type of observations, okay?
Okay.
Did you observe any droopy eyelids?
I can't say that I did.
Okay. Was my client on the nod? Do you know what that means?
I don't.
Did he appear to be going in and out of consciousness and dropping his head at any point and nodding off?
I did not observe that.
He didn't do that? Did he appear to have any drowsiness?
I don't recall.
Right. Did he appear?
I don't recall that, no.
Did he appear to have a...
Call. Does that mean you don't remember,
I don't remember.
or you didn't observe it? There's an important distinction.
I didn't observe that.
Is that to all of them?
Yeah, I can submit. I didn't observe it instead of I don't recall.
Okay.
I didn't observe that.
Have you been called to the scene where heroin addicts maybe are actively using heroin?
Not actively.
Okay. Have you seen the folks who maybe are not quite at the overdosed point, but are clearly under the influence?
Indeed.
Okay. And what are some of the symptoms they're exhibiting?
Fright.
Okay. You ever seen them nodding off like I talked about?
Indeed.
Okay. Have you ever seen them acting drowsy?
Indeed.
Have you ever seen them having depressed reflexes?
Indeed.
Have you ever seen any puncture marks on their body?
Yes.
Have you ever noticed them doing any itching?
Not itching.
What about talking about nausea?
Most times after the Narcan administration.
Did my client exhibit any of these types of symptoms that are somewhat synonymous with heroin use or opiate use?
Itching, nodding off, drowsiness, depressed behavior, those things.
Yes.
I do not remember that.
Okay. And you said don't remember. You don't remember because it's too long ago to remember, or it didn't something you saw?
I don't remember. It's not something that stood out for me.
Constricted eyelids or eyeballs, pupils, for lack of a, well, the correct word is pupils. You
That's
saw
correct.
constricted pupils. And you said something about those, right?
That's correct.
And other than that, you said that my client appeared out of sorts.
That's correct.
When you say out of sorts, did he appear to have any trouble maintaining his balance?
No.
Did he appear to be on any emotional ups and downs? Jags of crying and then...
Emotional, I can say yes. Ups and downs, I can't pinpoint that.
How did he seem emotional?
And disbelief in itself is an emotion. He seemed in a state of disbelief.
Okay. Is that consistent possibly with somebody who had just struck and killed a law enforcement officer on the roadway?
That is possible.
Okay. So the behavior in and of itself may not have been a clue to you, but when you combined it with the pupils, it led you to believe that further investigation is warranted.
That is correct.
Okay. You had some concerns that perhaps he was under the influence of any number of drugs.
That's correct.
Are you aware that a drug test, a sample of my client's blood was taken immediately thereafter?
I am not.
And again, we can agree that there are certain medications that cause constriction of the pupils.
Do you recall? Do you know?
Well, I know that there are a multitude of medications that cause pupil restriction that are opiate based.
Okay. Would a doctor or pharmacist, do you think, be in a better position to make that determination than you, sir?
Indeed.
Thank you.
No problem.
So opiates come in various types, classes, degrees, right?
That's correct.
Are you familiar with what methadone is medically?
It is a long-term treatment for heroin usage.
Are you aware that methadone is itself an opiate?
Yes.
Okay, how do you know that?
Training. There's a lot of reading and drug classes over time.
Right. So the things, if we have a category and at the top is opiates, and you could have various types of opiates, from heroin, and then also under this umbrella is methadone. From the medical perspective, is methadone going to create similar physiological conditions like heroin?
It
I'm going
does.
to object to this.
Sustained.
Well, is methadone a stimulant or a depressant?
Depression.
Can it depress breathing?
It can.
Can it slow reflexes?
It can.
Can it alter consciousness?
It can.
Can it cause loss of consciousness?
It can.
Thank you, sir.
So, anything based on that?
Yes, sir. You're indicating to me that methadone is a depressant?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Under what category are you talking about that it would be depressant?
Under which category?
Right. What drug classification?
I can't tell you that.
Okay. Are you aware that in fact, methadone is a narcotic analgesic, much like all opiates?
Yes.
And those are a completely different class than a CNS depressant.
That makes sense.
Okay. So when the prosecutor told you methadone's a depressant, that's not consistent with what the science is, correct?
In terms of titles, you are correct, sir.
Right. And CNS depressants do not cause pupil size dilation. You aware of that?
I'm not seeing as depressants. I understand exactly what you're saying.
Stimulants will.
May I,
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I apologize.
may I clarify?
Yes, sir.
When I understood the the attorney here saying, is it a depressant? I registered that with depressed behavior, depressed symptoms, not the classification. So forgive me for not understanding that.
No problem. You're not trying to say that this is a CNS depressant class drug.
That's correct.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Robert, thank you. May I step down here?
Judge, can we go?
Yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a break here. I don't want to deprive you of sustenance, okay? I don't think anybody has a chance to get over to the progressive field for the game unless you are really good with Uber. Or as Jimmy Donovan said, you can take Lyft, which is the little brother of Uber. Anyway, if you're back downstairs at 125, and Mrs. Smith will call you up. She has some things. I'm going to be doing things at lunch, but you should enjoy a great lunch. Keep in mind, don't discuss this case among yourselves or with anyone else. Don't form or express any opinions. Don't let anyone discuss the case with you or in your presence. Don't form any
Pardon?
Yes.
Oh,
There's no statement.
there's no statement from her. She's on the body camera.
Body cam not written.
Is there any police reports on her or anything?
She's just on the body cam.
She's just on the body camera.
Do you want you to testify to? What
Huh?
body cam? What body cam?
She's on Lakewood's body cam.
Lakewood.
I don't remember if she was on Mauer or
You can just see her on
Sanford
Chad's,
or
and then she
Shad.
talks on someone else.
Lakewood's body cam.
Oh, fine.
It says Jenny and JM, so.
There
Yes.
are amendments to each count. They're the same amendments for each defendant. So I'll try and just slow down.
No, just speak up. Speak up a little bit.
Carl, do you have it now?
And use
Your
the
work?
microphone.
I do.
Thank you. We're here in case 616-861, State versus Jonathan Harrison, Robert Askew, and Derek Askew. Derek, your attorney, Mr. Friedman, was not able to remain here, but he's indicated that you wish to enter a plea and that you are comfortable with Mr. Garber representing you for purposes of the plea, is that correct?
Yes.
And you understand that Mr. Friedman will be back and he'll represent you for sentencing?
Yes.
Okay. So, gentlemen, your attorneys have indicated that they worked out plea bargains on your behalf and that you wish to take advantage of the plea bargains. Is that correct, Mr. Harrison?
Yes.
Is that correct, Robert?
Yes.
Is that correct, Derek?
Yes.
And gentlemen, I'm referring to you by your first names, not because I'm being impolite, but just for clarity for the court reporter, okay? Right, so, you understand, if you enter into a plea bargain, you're not going to have a trial. Jonathan, is that clear?
Yes.
Robert?
Yes.
Derek?
Yes.
Jonathan, is it okay if I call you by your first name?
Yes.
Okay. Also, if you enter a change of plea from not guilty to guilty to take advantage of the plea bargain, you understand you're accepting the amended allegations and you're relieving the state of its burden of proof. Jonathan, is that clear?
Yes.
Robert?
Yes.
Derek?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to ask Mr. Mazzone from the prosecutor's office to outline for the court the proposed resolution of your cases. After that, I'll speak with your attorneys, ask them some questions, and then I'll speak with each of you further. If any of you have a question at any time, please ask me. Jonathan, is that clear?
Yes.
Robert?
Yes.
Derek?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mazzone?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm standing in for my colleague, APA Amanda Hall, today. It's my understanding that she is...
I'll have an objection to, Your Honor, but I don't know when they're going to call that individual.
Who and when? Well, tell them so I can know if we can argue now before they come in.
It's going to be that nurse. Julie something.
So Jenny Petri was a witness who was marked counsel only on discovery. So when you actually print discovery out, her name doesn't show, but it was sent over on the portal as a counsel only mark. Amanda's pulling it up now to show when it was sent and you received it.
Sorry, Your Honor.
We can argue it now? Good.
Wait until she pulls it up.
Okay.
If things go over in the electronic portal, and you have them, and you don't look at them,
There's nothing to look at. There's no report generated.
it tells you then, under the rules, that you can request. And there are counsel-only things that come up in a lot of cases. Gang cases, other things. Cases where there is sensitive information, so. I don't think you're unaware that this person is there.
Jenny is on body camera video. She does not provide a written statement, but her name was sent over again with the counsel only designation. She is on the body cams that were provided.
Your Honor, it was provided that her
Hold on.
name...
Hold on.
Okay.
Here. Ms. Jordan, there's a prospective witness that the defense may object to. Who is the witness?
The witness is Jenny Petri, Your Honor. Jenny Petri was on scene. She is captured on body camera footage. She does not provide a written statement. Her name was provided to defense counsel in discovery, but her name was marked counsel only. So when you print the discovery, it does not print, but it would have shown in his online portal.
Your Honor, that discovery, I'm sorry, Your Honor. That discovery was sent July 6th of 2017. I published it on the portal at 3:14. It hit the portal at 3:51 p.m. Let me see. And if you give me a minute, I can tell you when that particular package was viewed.
I will tell you, Your Honor, that I guess I'm unaware of how the counsel-only designation translates to written material. I had my staff download and print hard copies of everything on that portal so that I would be able to have that. And these witnesses are coming as a surprise to the defense.
Your Honor, in fact, I provided this court with a copy of a printed witness list. That is exactly how it shows up on the portal.
even if I could have an opportunity to talk to these witnesses prior to testimony, that might solve some of my dilemmas.
That would be readily agreeable.
Your Honor, she is witness number 88, and as you can see, her name appears on that page, as does her address.
And this came over July.
July 6th at 3:51 p.m., Your Honor. I saw that that particular discovery was last accessed on July 22nd, 2017. Number 86.
Yeah. Is this a person who's going to testify about observation of the incident or of the aftermath of the incident?
Of the aftermath of the incident. And the state has no objection to defense counsel speaking to the witness, although it's her decision whether or not she speaks to anyone.
You have talked with her.
Correct, Your Honor.
Does she have knowledge of any statements made or attributed to Mr. Gaspar?
Yes, Your Honor. She asked the defendant what happened, and he says, I don't know.
And that's the extent of it.
That is the extent of the verbal information the defendant provides her. He keeps saying, I don't know, and she will say she prayed with the defendant on scene.
Well, y'all can talk to her in the hall if she wishes to talk to you, but this was sent over. It's in the court. It's on the court public docket. Such a witness is there. And I don't think that your client was prejudiced or disadvantaged by this potential witness.
Is she going to try and use her nursing background? I understand she may be a nurse to talk about signs of impairment.
She is going to talk about her observations of the defendant the same way we've asked every other witness who has testified.
I would just ask the parties in a minute before the jury comes in, you know what you're intending to ask, and then it'll tell him whether he really objects or whether it's going to be the same cross-examination that others have.
I guess, yes, John, I guess when I question her, I don't know why this wouldn't have been broken down and generated some type of report at some point in time.
What do you mean report? She's not an expert.
No, but I'm not an expert, but I imagine the police reached out to her and had contact with her to give this information to the prosecutors, and yet there's no generated interaction with police.
She said that she didn't get a statement.
Right.
She did talk with somebody.
She spoke with someone, but she did not provide a written statement, and she is on the body camera footage.
But she's not listed in any discovery. She may walk across a body camera, but she's not
She
listed.
is listed in discovery. They said she's a potential witness.
Right.
If you don't follow up on it, that's not on them.
But there's no police reports generated. There's no investigative reports. I imagine our office had some contact with this woman. I imagine this is...
They don't have to reveal what they're talking about in witness preparation any more than you do with your witnesses.
Will I be allowed to talk to her, Your Honor?
If she wishes to talk to you, sure.
Thank
Are you planning on putting her on last? Today? Or when?
We can move her to the last witness for the
Move
day.
her last. Our jury is waiting. We have other witnesses that are available.
Thank you, Your Honor.
At the end of every day, you all should talk and exchange who
Yes,
you
sir.
think the next day's witnesses will be so that it goes smoothly. I want to use their time well.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
All rise for the jury. Court is in session. Please be seated.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Anybody go out and see the pets? You have one in your backpack, all right? Mr. House? Jordan?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the state will call Michael Sanford.
those of you who did not make it over to the progressive field, it's 1-1 in the 7th. We didn't leave our, I don't think we even went down as far as the end of the hall. Sir, if you could approach, please. Raise your right hand. Do solemnly swear or affirm, subject to the penalties of perjury, that the testimony you're about to give here will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Please be seated. Mr. Sanford, are you soft spoken?
Under certain circumstances,
You can talk to the Cavs playoff game, okay? So everybody can hear you.
Okay.
Good afternoon, sir. Can you please state and spell your name for the record?
Michael Sanford, Michael Sanford.
And Mr. Sanford, are you employed?
Yes,
What do you do, sir?
I am a case manager for Frontline Services. I pretty much provide case management to individuals that are homeless who have a co-occurring diagnosis, mental health, and substance use.
Mr. Sanford, I want to turn your attention to September 15th of 2016. Where were you that day, sir?
At the scene, I guess, of the incident.
Tell me what happened before you arrived to the scene of the fatal crash.
I was leaving work. I was working half day, so I was leaving, and I was just driving down 90, and that was pretty much it.
Tell me what happened as you were driving down 90.
I was in the far left lane, and I say in the distance, but I mean it was a good distance. It was like a viaduct, like a bridge almost, and on the other side of the bridge I saw a cop car with a cop car in the next to the median. The door was open, and the cop, the trooper, was standing on the side closest to the median, and he began to flag a car down. It was a huge gap in traffic, so I didn't know if he was trying to flag me down or someone else. So he was doing like a gesture, like, that. And so as we approached, once I got through the median, he was still doing it, and I got over into the lane, or into the next to the median.
And Mr. Sanford, what sort of car were you driving that day? What color?
It's a blue Honda Civic.
And how far were you away when you first see the trooper indicating for someone to pull over?
I mean, it was a huge gap. Enough that myself and a few cars, we couldn't really discern who he was actually flagging over, because a few cars also got over as well.
And when you see the trooper doing this flagging motion, what is it that you do, sir?
I get over.
How do you get over?
So I was already in the far left lane. So like I said, once I got under the median and past his car, I just, slowly pull over. And again, we were confused, because even once I got over in my rear view, my left rear view, I could still see him kind of doing the gesture. So you know what I mean? It was like, well, maybe it wasn't me, but it was just enough to get over.
Tell me what it is that you see next, sir.
As I pull over, I hear a huge thump, and in my rear view mirror, the middle mirror, I see, I don't see the actual moment of impact, but I see the cop or the trooper on the car and go up. So I heard the thump, and immediately I see, him on the car going upwards. And so, I was kind of frozen for a second, but I, put my car in park, I hop out, and I run back, and literally as I'm coming, I see him fall behind the car, the impact to the ground, behind the car, behind the black car.
Where does the black car come from, if you know?
I'm really not sure. I'm not sure. Because it was, like I said, it was a few cars around.
What is it that you do next, sir?
So when I get out, like I said, I'm running to the car and the trooper, and the car is like smushed up, the windshield completely shattered, and it was, I don't know what it was, like some type of like bodily fluid, I would assume, or something on the front. And I see his vest and his ID, like his tag in front of the car. So I run, and when I see him behind the car, I go back to my car to grab my phone to call 911. I get on the phone with 911, and they said, we've already received a call, we're sending someone, stay there, basically just kind of talking me through it, and then we got off the phone.
Mr. Sanford, you keep referring to the car. What is the car that you are talking about?
The black, doing that, he was walking like from the side closest to the median, more towards the back of his car, like past the trunk.
And so when you saw the trooper, he was still where? Where was he situated when you saw him as you passed?
At that point, like behind his, behind the car. So close to like, cause I remember there were rumble strips. So, close to the rumble strips.
But when the trooper was close to the rumble strip, was he still inside the berm or was he in the flow of traffic?
I mean,
If you know, if you don't know.
I remember thinking that it was close, like he was close to the line, but I don't know if he was in traffic, if that's what you're asking. Like, behind the car on the rumble strip flagging, I can recall that, but as far as like, I don't know.
And you recall, as you were driving up, how far, what were you back when you first saw the trooper?
Well, I saw the car like very far, of course, but as far as when he was flagging, it was far, but I don't know. I would say like a block, but I mean, you know what I mean? I don't know. I don't know. Sorry if that's
No,
helpful.
you're fine. I just want you to answer the questions if you can, that's all. After speaking to law enforcement on scene, was there anything else you did?
Not that I recall. I mean.
And when you spoke to law enforcement, did you provide one or two written statements?
So 2 days following, I altogether ended up providing, it felt like 3, it might have been 2, but it felt like 3, but I met with one of a detective at Panera, and I provided a statement then.
Tell me about the time you provided the second statement.
A lot of the questioning was, repetitious. I mean, a lot of it was clarity about the initial statement. And I remember at one point, she kind of identified my car. So she was saying, you have the blue car that was involved, and I said yes. So we actually went to my car and she inspected my car. And so I remember her specifically saying there was no paint transfer or something, but she said she really needed to see my car. And so she looked specifically at the back of my car, which I told her there was no impact. My car was brand new at that point. I might have had it 2 weeks. So.
One moment, please, Your Honor.
Yeah.
Now, you were doing some gestures with your hands. Can you explain to me what it was you saw the trooper doing with his hands?
I mean, it's more or less like flagging somebody down. It was like, and that type of thing, like get over,
May the record please reflect that the witness is using both his arms to demonstrate a movement of moving over in the leftward direction.
It will.
Thank you. And when you saw the trooper doing that, was he using one hand or both hands?
It was both, like he was, you know.
And as you're doing that motion, you're indicating fingers being used. Is that the same technique the trooper was using?
Yeah, I mean, it was like exactly what I'm doing. I mean, at one point it was like, you know, so.
May the record also reflect that at one point in time, the witness is also using a circular motion with two fingers extended outwards as he is gesturing over to the left.
It will.
Thank you. And what did you understand those hand movements to mean?
Tag, you're like somebody get over.
Nothing further at this time.
Hello, Mr. Sanford.
Hi.
My name is John Sin, and I'm going to get to ask you some questions today, okay?
All right.
So if I ask anything you don't understand, you can just ask me to rephrase it. Is that fair?
Yep.
All right, sir. You're the driver of the blue Honda?
Yes.
Okay, and you were coming from work that day?
Yes.
You had like a half day or something?
Yeah. I wasn't feeling well, so.
Okay. And, sir, you saw the gray highway patrol car at some point, right?
I'm not sure of the color, but I saw the trooper. But yeah, the car.
Okay.
Yep.
What lane were you in when you first saw the police car?
The left lane, so closest to me.
Were you in the far left lane?
Yes, the far left.
Fast
Yep.
lane, closest to the berm?
Yes.
Okay. And how long have you been in that lane, sir?
I'm not sure.
Okay. So you see this trooper. What is he wearing?
His uniform.
Okay.
He's wearing his uniform.
Is he wearing any type of reflective vest, or is there any type of orange or yellow reflective material on him, or is it just the plain trooper uniform, the dark grays and the...
It was a vest as far as like reflective, not that I recall, but I mean...
Are you talking about his bulletproof vest?
Yeah.
Okay. Any type of... Have you ever seen guys on a road crew that wear like an orange vest?
Right, yep.
Matter of fact, you stayed on the scene for a while, did you not?
Yes.
And a lot of folks showed up, first responders and whatnot?
Yes.
And a lot of them had the orange vest on and the yellow vest on?
I don't recall.
Okay. Do you recall if the trooper was wearing such a thing?
He was wearing a vest as far as like a construction vest, not that I recall, but the vest that I also saw in front of the car after the impact next to his back, I mean, it was the basic like bulletproof vest.
What color was it?
Black, I want to say.
So it wasn't one that you would think was primarily designed for visibility. It was more the uniform that these guys wear, the bulletproof stuff.
Yeah, it was the uniform.
Okay. Now, when you saw the trooper, you were in the far left lane. What was traffic like?
It was a huge gap in traffic, and like that was the thing. I think that the reason why a few of us got over, because it was a huge gap. So I remember being in the left lane, and there were also cars on the side, and from the distance, we didn't know exactly which one.
Okay.
Um,
I'm sorry. Tell me what a gap means to you in large space in traffic.
Yeah, there were no cars in front of us for like a significant distance.
Okay, I understand that. And you indicated that the trooper did some motions, and were you confident of who he was addressing when he did those motions?
No.
Did you know if you were the person that was being pulled over?
No, I got over because, again, I'm in the far left lane and I see this motion. I wasn't going to risk, like, not getting over, and he's, you know.
Okay. Getting over to where? Where do you get over to?
Well, I mean, we were getting over into where he was gesturing us to go to, you know, into the bank with, like, the median.
In front of his car into the berm.
Right.
So he's gesturing you to leave the lane of traffic, you believe, and go off into the front of his car so he can give you a ticket.
Yes.
You don't know whether he was talking to you or other drivers?
No.
Were you driving in a pack with other drivers?
It was a cluster of us. I was the first one in the lane as far as the gap, but there were also other cars in each lane. And like I said, it was a significant space between, you know, whatever traffic was up ahead.
What speed were you folks traveling?
I don't know.
90's kind of a speedway sometimes. Would you agree with me on that?
It's a highway, yeah. I mean, you know.
Right. But were all you folks going the same speed, pretty much?
We were in a. It's kind of hard to paint the picture. We were in a pack, so I would assume like we were all going the same, you know, around the same speed. It wasn't like a huge gap in between any of us. It was traffic was past where he was, the median, and each lane had cars.
I understand you perfectly. No, pretty much all of us, most of us drive that area or have driven, so we kind of know what you're talking about, but it's important that I get the details out. That's okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, were you surprised to see a police car there when you got up there?
Not really. To be honest, prior to this event, I always see cops, like in that area on 90. I don't make it a habit of driving that way since this event, just because it's very traumatizing, if I'm just being completely honest. But I mean, even for work, we see, you know, officers, troopers, and, you know, local officers there all the time.
Well, you're familiar that sometimes police officers will position themselves in a manner to catch the most speeders.
Objection, Your Honor.
That's the job, right? Traffic enforcement?
Right.
Okay. So, in your opinion, is this officer position himself in a point where he can catch speeders? That seems to be what he's doing, right?
Yes, but I mean, like, it was nothing obstructing my view, because I've seen where cops will hide. It wasn't like he was hiding. If that's what, you know what I mean? If that's what you're asking, he wasn't hiding, he was in plain view.
Okay. When you saw him, was he out of his car?
Yes.
Have you ever seen officers in that area on the roadway out of their cars before?
It's like yes and no. I mean, it wasn't out of the ordinary to see a cop car there, and, you know, to see they're always there. So I guess in my mind, that wasn't what was odd to me. It was just, you know, how far back we were and being gestured, but no.
Okay, explain that to me.
It was significant. There was a gap. It was a gap in traffic. It was a significant space. So I didn't know who he was. That was, I guess that's what was going through my mind. Is he flagging me down?
Right. You had some indecision at that point because you don't know if you're supposed to pull over or if he's talking to the guy next to you. Is that safe to say?
Right. Yeah.
How long did it take for you to figure that out?
I don't know that we ever figured it out, because literally as I got into past the rumble strips, I heard a huge thump, and like I said, in my rear view, I saw, you know, that there was an accident.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. You indicate that the cop comes out and makes this motion that you take it may mean you're going to have to pull over, or at least somebody's getting pulled over, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you do in response to that? You slow down?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, to get over.
Okay.
Yep.
How do you, what's the process for you to get over physically? What do you have to do with your vehicle to get over?
Hit the brake, like press on the brake.
Okay. So you got to hit the brakes,
Mm-hmm.
and then you've got to work your way over off the road, right?
Right.
And you got to take your speed down from whatever it was to a speed where you can pretty much get off the road in an area that you can still walk up to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I want to be really clear, and I know memories can fade, and I've looked at some of your reports from that night. You are off the road and you are in the berm when you hear the thud. Is that safe to say?
Yes.
Okay, so you are no longer in the lane of travel in your blue Honda.
No.
But when that officer gets hit, you are all the way off the berm.
Right.
Now you said in your written statement a couple times that you've been there for a few minutes, but we throw that word around minute a lot. You know, a minute is 60 seconds. 1, 2, 3. So when you said in your statements, I was there for a few minutes before I heard the thump. We want to work on that time frame with me, or are you still saying it's minutes?
Not minutes. I mean, I didn't sit and clock how long I was, but no, I wouldn't say like 2 minutes.
Okay.
Or anything.
How long do you think you were sitting there on the side of the road before that officer got struck? If you think about 10 seconds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. How many?
Like 10, 15 seconds. Like,
that's good. I mean, I realize you didn't clock it. We're just trying to figure it out. So you're off the road, you hear the big thunk, and then you look back, and you see the trooper on the window of the Hyundai. Is that safe to say?
on the window, but like going up.
Okay.
Because when I got out and turned around, I like visibly watched him hit the ground behind the car.
And at this point in time, when the trooper's being struck, your car is in the berm, not in the lane of travel.
Right. When because as soon as I heard the thump and saw, I jumped out. I put my car in park and I got out. So I was out of the car and I watched him.
Would you agree with me that this whole thing was paralyzing to you?
Yeah.
Probably the scariest thing you've ever been through, or one of them?
I've never seen as much blood and gore as that day.
So, would you say that perhaps a live video of the event might be a better recollection of it than your memory? Or are you pretty confident in your memory?
I'm fine. I don't want to watch it.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask you to watch it. Yeah.
Everybody can see.
What's going to happen, sir, is you're looking at a video that is being filmed from the back of the trooper's car. And I think what we're looking at is 90 westbound. Does that look like 90 westbound to you?
Yes.
Hard to tell. Okay. And when something of importance is going to happen is when the trooper crosses that back camera, and that's going to be about 30 seconds or so from now. But it's safe to say that when the trooper was struck, you believe that your car was up here somewhere, and I'm indicating in the berm, right?
That's the front of the car?
On the left.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I was
In front of
ahead. Yeah.
At the time the trooper was struck. Okay, let's stop it right there. How do I do that? Okay, did you see that happen? It's horrible to watch, I understand that, sir. But did you see your car in the far lane of travel at the time the trooper was struck?
vague. My attention was drawn to the impact that just...
I understand. So if I told you that your car at the time of the impact was in the right here, and that you just now, after the trooper came down, pulled in front of the black car to the side of the road, would you agree with me that that's probably more correct than the memory that you have?
For the sake of not watching it again,
Is there any reason to think this has been doctored or that's not your car?
no. From what it looked like, I didn't see anything until I saw his body just now.
Okay. Well, I'm going to need you to answer some questions on it, so I'm going to show it to you again if that's what we need to do. But I need to know where your car is in relation to that trooper. You testified that you were in front of the car when the accident happened, and you had a good 10 to 15 seconds of sitting there before the trooper got injured, and you saw the whole thing through your rearview mirror.
As I recall it, but so I guess I'm not following what you're saying.
Well, I want to know if the things you testified to, the fact that you were parked in the berm at the time the trooper was hit, you'd already pulled over for the trooper at the time that he was hit, and that you witnessed this through your rearview mirror, you witnessed this accident, if that's possible, given what we see on this video about your car being actually next to the black Hyundai and stopped in the roadway.
I was not next to, because I could see it in my rearview mirror.
Okay.
So maybe I'm not perfectly where you, like...
And it's been a long time. I'm not putting word, I mean, it's been a long time. I'm going to show it to you one more time. Yeah, there you go. I'm sorry, I shouldn't put you. I really appreciate you doing this.
Do you want me to take it all the way?
No, you don't have to. Now again, you're the blue car, not the black car, correct?
Right.
And when the trooper walks across this back window, 12:44:22. Okay. Now those are the events you say that you saw out of your back window?
Okay, I see what you mean as far as, so I was still in the lane, but I saw that from my rear view.
Okay. So you agree with me that you were still in the lane and you had not yet pulled over?
Right.
And you agree with me that this was split second?
Yeah, I mean, from that, it didn't feel like that, but clearly from
Right.
the video.
But we did this whole thing, you and I, about the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you estimated 10 to 15, and that was like that.
Well, I mean, you lived through it, and then you tell me how it feels.
I would not want to, and I do apologize you had to go through this, but this is a big deal. What happened out there is a huge deal. I know it's hurting you, but I'm defending the guy here.
Same questions.
So, could we agree with me that perhaps your memories weren't as clear today as maybe they could have been based on what we saw in the video?
As with any traumatic experience, my trauma response might view it in a different lens than what you might perceive. So,
Who have you talked to about this case?
I've definitely gone to counseling.
Okay, and I appreciate that. What about from law enforcement? Who did you talk to from law enforcement?
I don't remember the troopers' names, but I spoke with 2 in person and 1 over the phone.
Okay, so you've talked to 2 in person. When did that happen, sir?
Around the time of the event, one at the scene, another a few days following, and then maybe a week or 2 later over the phone.
Okay. What about prosecutors and whatnot? Have you had a chance to talk to the prosecutor's office about this case?
Like you saying when it happened or?
Since then, leading up to today.
I spoke to someone today and trying to think if I might have spoken to one during that same time that everything was going on with the officer. The third time I might have spoken to someone, at least from the courts, that same day.
Okay. So there's a lot of information coming at you.
Yeah.
You've had to go to counseling for this?
Yes.
Just witnessing this would you say you were in shock?
Yes, absolutely.
Were you behaving as you normally behave after something like this, or were you a little changed?
Again, I mean, the trauma responses, I've never seen anything like that much blood or gore. So, I mean,
Okay.
for a minute, I wouldn't even take 90. You drive that area on 90.
What about my client? You had some contact with my client, right?
At the scene, and it was literally, like I said, the only thing I remember is he was asking, what were you guys stopping for or something?
If I told you in your statement you said he seemed angry, and the anger was directed at you, would you recall that, or would you want to see your statement?
I would need to see the statement.
Show you page. I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 1450, sir. And I would ask you to go in there to page 5, although it'll be labeled page 4 of 6. So you can flip some of those. You see page 4 of 6, sir?
Yes.
Okay. Go down to the bottom paragraph. And is this your handwriting, sir?
No.
Okay. Is this your signature on the bottom of it where it says informant signature?
Yes.
Do you remember giving a statement to the Highway Patrol?
Yes.
Okay. What was your response, sir, when the Highway Patrolman said, did the driver of the black car make any statements to you?
He was angry. He told me and the driver of the Malibu, you guys stopped so fast. Why did you guys stop so fast? The driver of the black Veloster lit a cigarette and started pacing the scene.
Given how much this event affected you, do you think there's anything unusual about the way my client responded to
Objection,
this?
Your Honor.
Did you notice anything unusual, or did you find his behavior unusual given what had just happened?
I don't know him. I wouldn't know if he's behaving out of the ordinary or not.
Do you think it'd be important to know how he normally reacts to see if pacing and smoking a cigarette is how he normally reacts to stress?
Objection.
I'll withdraw that. Thank you, sir. I have no further questions for you. I'm going to take that back, and I appreciate your time today.
I approach, please, Your Honor.
Yes.
Mr. Sanford, I'm handing you what's been marked for identification purposes, the State's Exhibit 1450. I would like you to read that statement in its entirety out loud. Please take your time. The court reporter has to get down everything you say, and we tend to talk faster when we read.
Sorry.
Don't worry.
Well, this clearly was me writing fast, but I put I want driving in the far left lane, I'm assuming he was. I observed the state trooper flagging down a car, in parentheses, unsure if he was flagging me down in parentheses. I slowed down and got into the left shoulder of the freeway past the rumble strips. Moments after, in my rear view, I saw a black car with a shattered window. I jumped out the car and called 911.
Keep reading the whole document.
Do I need to? I, Michael T. Sanford, hereby make voluntary statement to Trooper D. Gonzalez, Trooper R. Cantors at Panera Bread, Westlake, on Thursday, 9/15/16 at 12:45 p.m. I called 911 from my cell phone after witnessing a state trooper being hit on the shoulder of I-90 highway. Prior to hearing the accident, I was in the far left lane of I-90. I observed a state trooper signaling for, parentheses, what I assumed, in parentheses, me to pull over. I was.
At one point in time, you were asked a question about if you've spoken with law enforcement or prosecutors prior to this trial. Do you recall that question?
Yes.
And did you speak to law enforcement and prosecutors?
I'm over here, David. Hi, would you state your full name and spell your last name for the record?
My name is David Michelki, Michalski.
What is your work address?
159 Crocker Park Boulevard, Westlake, Ohio.
Okay. And Mr. Michelski, I'm going to butcher your name, I'm going to warn you. How are you employed?
I'm an attorney.
What kind of attorney?
I practice commercial litigation.
And what days of the week do you work?
7 days a week, but typically Monday through Friday.
Eastbound?
Daily, I would say.
Did you use it on the day of September 15, 2016?
I did.
Did you use it around the lunch hour?
I did.
What was your purpose in doing that?
I had lunch with a former colleague in Cleveland at a restaurant on West 58th, and then I went back and entered onto I-90 at West Boulevard.
And is that your normal route of travel from this luncheon?
Yeah, I would say when I go to that restaurant, yes.
And can you tell the jury what you saw that day?
I entered onto I-90, the far right lane at West Boulevard, and I think there are two exits. I know West 117th at least, and there may be a Warren exit going westbound. But in any event, I was in the far right-hand lane, proceeding as I normally would, when I came across the incident that we're here for today.
When you say proceeding as you normally would, what speed were you proceeding in?
The speed limit, it was between 60 and 65.
And do you know how many lanes of travel there are through there?
I believe there are 4.
So were you 4 lanes over from the median?
That is correct.
And what called your attention to the median?
I wouldn't have ordinarily been looking across 4 lanes of traffic, but my attention was brought over to the median by a screeching of tires, some sort of traffic maneuver that I wouldn't ordinarily have been looking for, but I caught it out of my peripheral vision, and I turned to the left.
Prior to that, had you seen a state trooper car in that median?
I had not.
Do you remember what traffic was like that day?
Like it typically is on a weekday afternoon. I mean, there's traffic on 90, but it was certainly not bumper to bumper. It was flowing at the normal posted speed.
Is this a luncheon that you go to frequently?
I go to lunch with his former colleague pretty much every Thursday, and it's usually in the same set of restaurants around West 58th.
And is this the same traffic that you saw on any other given Thursday?
It would have been.
Do you remember what traffic around you was doing? Were you in a pack or were you alone?
I believe I was alone.
And when you when you heard the screeching tires, what did you look over and see?
I saw within a second or so the impact of what I later understood was the defendant's vehicle and Trooper Velez.
Did you see the color of the car that hit Trooper Velez?
You know, I didn't process it immediately at the time, but when I later pulled back and looked, you know, back down the highway, I did see the color of the vehicle.
Do you remember it now?
I believe it was a black vehicle.
Did you see any of the actions of those vehicles prior to the accident?
I did not.
What did you do once you saw the impact?
I pulled over probably 50 yards ahead at McKinley, which is the next exit from the highway, and I called 911.
And when you called 911, were you able to get through?
I did, and people had already called. The dispatcher was already aware of the accident.
Did you remain on scene?
I did not. There were people who were already in the berm, and I think there were some people crossing the highway as well to assist the trooper. So I exited at McKinley and then later reported the accident to the Cleveland Police Department.
Why did you choose the Cleveland Police Department?
I have a friend who is a detective in the Cleveland Police Force. I called him and I said, you know, who's going to be leading this investigation? He said he wasn't sure at the time, and we're talking within 20 minutes of the accident, and he said just call Cleveland Traffic, and he gave me the number.
Did you contact the Highway Patrol or did they contact you?
I contacted Cleveland, and then the Highway Patrol came out to see me at my home.
And did you provide a written statement at that time?
I did.
Is there any written statement other than the one you provided to the Highway Patrol?
No.
How are the troopers with you?
Nice, civil, professional. There's one trooper, it was not troopers. Very professional, very civil, polite.
Did you feel any type of pressure to make a statement?
I did not.
Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Sir, I'm John Sin. I'm the defense attorney in this case. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Mr. Sen.
Okay, I'm going to ask you some questions. Sound fair?
Sounds fair to me.
Okay, sir. You were coming back from lunch and you were on 90,
I was.
and you heard a commotion.
Yes, I believe it was a screeching of tires, but there was something in the traffic caused me to look to my left.
Okay. Now, today, sir, you're using the term screeching of tires. But I've noticed that you use that and the prosecutor use that, and you've had some time to reflect on this case. But do you remember making a statement that, well, to the troopers, remember the statement you gave to them?
I do.
Okay. I'm going to show you that, sir, and ask, well, may I ask you before, is that the term you used with them, that you heard a screeching of tires?
In all honesty, I don't remember.
Okay. Maybe this will refresh your memory for you.
John.
I'll use the State's Exhibit. I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 1453, sir. And since I imagine that the prosecutor is going to have you read the whole thing, perhaps I could have you read the whole thing. Is that no? Okay, I won't do that, Your Honor. Did you use the term screeching tires to describe the noise that you heard prior to the trooper being hit?
I did not use the term screeching tires.
What term did you use to describe the noise that drew your attention to the area prior to the trooper being hit?
I used the term screeching brakes.
Okay. So you heard brakes screeching.
Yes. I will tell you, I'm not sure I could recognize the difference between screeching brakes and screeching tires, but I heard a screeching.
At that time, when you first talked to the police officers involved in this, you chose the term brakes.
I did. I wrote screeching brakes.
And that was prior to actually witnessing the trooper get hit.
Yes, second before.
Okay. So we can assume that either that one of the cars involved there was making the screeching sound and the seconds before the trooper got hit.
I believe the screeching came from the area where the accident took place.
Do you know if that sound of screeching brakes or screeching tires came from the blue Honda or whether it came from the black Veloster?
I do not.
When you saw the black Veloster, was it still moving?
It was still moving when it struck the trooper, yes.
Did it appear to be braking at that time?
I have no way to don't know.
Okay. How about the blue Honda? Do you remember anything about the blue Honda?
I do not.
What was the traffic like that day, sir?
I would say it was a normal weekday I-90 westbound traffic.
And I don't take 90 a lot. What's normal weekday I-90 traffic like?
I haven't done a traffic count, but I would say that there was, traffic was moving normally. There were, I can't say anything more than just that.
Okay. And what's the speed limit there? Do we know?
It's either 60 or 65.
Do most people travel 60 or 65 on I-90 at that time?
I'm not in a position to say most people. I don't know the answer to that question.
Is it unusual that people are traveling a little faster than that?
People probably do travel a little faster than that.
Okay. Hence the highway patrol out there writing tickets.
I assume that's the reason, yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. Permission to approach the witness?
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Michelki, Mr. Sim, Attorney Sim is very correct. I'm going to ask you to read your statement into the record.
You want me to read the entire statement?
Please, sir.
Okay. I was driving westbound in the right lane of I-90. I had entered the highway at West Boulevard after having lunch with a colleague. I remember leaving the restaurant at approximately 12:35 p.m.
You're reading faster than I can hear.
Well, I'm sorry.
He's taking everything down.
I understand. I totally understand that. I do that in depositions all the time.
Thank you.
I was driving westbound in the right lane of I-90. I had entered the highway at West Boulevard after having lunch with a colleague. I remember leaving the restaurant at approximately 12:35 p.m. I believe I stayed in the far right lane past West 117. Shortly after passing West 117, I caught the accident to my left out of my peripheral vision. I was directly parallel to the accident in... witnessed a black car veer toward the median and strike what I now know to have been the trooper. I immediately pulled over to the right and called 911. The dispatcher took a while to answer, and she was already aware of the accident. And she said an ambulance was en route. I saw a white car parked about 50 yards ahead of the accident in the left lane, and I meant to say there was a man walking back towards the scene on his cell phone.
So in that statement, do you say that you heard screeching brakes or you believe you heard screeching brakes?
I believe I heard screeching brakes.
So is it safe to say that at that time you actually didn't know what that sound was?
I think that's fair to say.
And is it fair to say that that's still your memory today?
That is still my memory today.
Thank you, sir. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
No, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Honor, may the attorneys approach.
State is going to call Gene Fitch.
Your Honor, if it's okay, I'm going to approach witness
solemnly swear or affirm, subject to the penalties of perjury, that the testimony about the future will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Be careful, get out there. The chair doesn't move.
It doesn't.
You tell me where to stand to help you best.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you so much. You're welcome.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'll be asking questions, so will Mr. Sim for the defense. If you don't understand somebody's question, let us know and we'll get a clean question to you, okay?
Yes.
Would you state and spell your name, please?
Jean Marie Fitch. It's JeanMarie, F as in Frank, ITCH.
Thank you, Ms. Fitch. I want to talk to you about the event that brings us here, but I also want to talk to you about a circumstance that you had a connection to this event by prior acquaintance. Is that accurate? You knew Mr. or Trooper Velez?
Well, I just knew of him through another trooper.
Okay. Before we get to the event, give us that background as to the acquaintance or knowledge you had.
Well, I never spoke to Velez, Trooper Velez personally, but I knew a very good friend of his.
Okay.
That's all.
All right. And was that in a out of the workplace type of acquaintance with the
Yes,
trooper?
out of the workplace.
All right. Now, I want to take your attention to September 15th, 2016, midday, I-90 West. Were you traveling that route?
Yes.
Who were you with?
My daughter,
What's her name?
Michelle Fitch.
Okay. What vehicle were you in?
I was in a 2009 Chevy Cobalt.
What color?
Blue,
How many doors on that Cobalt?
2.
Where were you coming from? Where were you going to?
We we exited onto 90, heading west from West 25th Street onto 90.
Okay. What was your destination?
Home in Amherst, Ohio.
Did you come upon an event that you paid attention to?
Yes.
I want you to describe it in as much detail as you can from the beginning of when your attention was first drawn to the event. Take us through it, then I'll have some follow-up questions, all right?
Yes. We were heading west and the traffic started to slow. And my daughter was driving. I was the passenger. And we were in the lane next to the berm where, there's the concrete barrier, the berm part, and then that lane. We were in that lane.
Okay, so you're in the leftmost, what people sometimes call the passing lane?
Passing lane, yes.
Okay.
Yes. And we came upon, the cars start slowing down and stopping. And we came upon Trooper Velez laying in the road, injured very badly.
What did your daughter do with your vehicle?
We stopped to try to assist him if we could. And his injuries were very substantial. And by the time I got up to him, there was another woman that had come up and started to work on him before Lakewood paramedics arrived.
Make any 911 calls?
No.
Were you ever interviewed by might have been wearing a body cam that you spoke in front of?
One gentleman approached me and my daughter near the end of, after they had taken Trooper Velez to the hospital, approached us and asked for our names and phone numbers and addresses and apologized for us having to see such a astronomical event.
Okay. Do you know what law enforcement agency that individual was with?
I believe the State Highway Patrol, but I'm not sure. He was in street clothes. It wasn't a news reporter. And they just, apologized that we had to come across such a terrible, terrible thing.
Did Did you see the event that caused the trooper to be lying on the pavement?
No, I did not see Trooper Velez get hit. He had already been hit. I just wanted to help.
Once you were there at roadside, did you look around for the vehicle, put together the scene in your mind and say, what just happened here?
It was the black car, and it was quite damaged. And then there was a gold car that I do believe was about maybe 10 feet forward of the black car. That's who was getting pulled over by Trooper Velez. And that car was up near the concrete barrier, but a little bit on an angle. And I did not see Trooper Velez walking up to that car. Like I said, when I got there, he was already on the ground.
In terms of your overall time on the roadside that day, how long did you remain at that location?
Well, they put crime scene tape around my car, and we had to stay there pretty much. They had taken Kenny to the hospital, or Trooper Velez to the hospital, but everything that he owned on his body was laying on my car. His hat, his gun, all that was on my car. So I had to wait till they cleaned the scene before we could leave.
During that period of time, did you develop any information in which you were able to recognize who the operator of the black damaged vehicle to be?
Yes, I seen him standing there, and he seemed to be somewhat in a daze. And by that I mean, I don't know if he was in shock or anything else. So,
ever seen this person before in your
no.
life? All right, so you have nothing to compare what you saw that day with any prior experience?
No. He appeared very shook up.
Did you talk to any other witnesses on the scene?
No.
While you were doing the things that you described, do you know where your daughter was?
She was stopping traffic in the lanes to the north of where Kenny laid, or Trooper Velez laid, because people were just like rednecking, and some of them didn't even slow down.
I think the term you mean is rubbernecking.
Rubbernecking, yes. I'm sorry.
Would that be correct?
Yes.
So you never had words with the person that you believe to be the driver of the black car instructed?
I did ask him if he was okay.
Did you receive a response?
He said something about his hand, but there was no visible marks on him that I could see.
Any marks on his face or head?
No.
No, you don't know, or no, there were none?
No, there were none.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Here I have no questions. Thank you.
And you step down.
Okay, thank you.
Very careful.
I'm learning. Yeah, just. Thank you, darling.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a break here. Keep in mind, don't discuss this case unresolved with anyone else. Don't let anyone discuss the case with you or any discussion from the former expressing opinions. No media, no investigation, but somebody does email me to check on the outcome of the game. So probably 4 until when we come back tonight. Am mindful of your time and your obligations with picking up the football, so I've got that. Thanks.
All rise.
I have as many as I want to start. Amanda, do you have other people today? Amanda,
I'm sorry.
do you have other people today? Others?
No, Your Honor. No.
Amanda, do you wish to video?
No, thank you.
No video, thanks.
All rise for the jury. Court is in session. Please be seated.
Raise your hand. I swear or affirm, substance and consideration, that the testimony about the will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, sir.
You can see it. Sure.
Good afternoon, Ms. Petri. Can you please state and spell your full name?
My name is Jenny Petrick, Jennypietrick.
And Ms. Petri, are you employed?
I am.
Where do you work?
I work at the Eaton World Headquarters in Beechwood.
And what do you do there?
I'm the health center manager. I'm an RN in charge of the health center there for the employees.
And Ms. Petri, how long have you been a registered nurse?
I've been a registered nurse for 40 years.
And has all that time been spent at Eaton?
No, it hasn't.
Where were some of the other locations you worked at?
I started first as an LPN, and I worked at Parma Hospital in the medical surgical area for 3 years. And then I transferred over to Metro Burn Unit, where I was a nurse there in the burn unit for 5 years. And after getting married, I moved to Westlake, where I worked at St. John West Shore for 23 years. During that time, I worked in the ICU, the emergency room, the operating room, the pre-op, the post-op, pediatrics, and I also was a nursing supervisor towards the end when I worked there.
Ms. Petri, I want to turn your attention to September 15th of 2016. What were you doing on that day?
I was running errands with my fiance's son.
And where were you running errands at?
We were over towards West 117th. We stopped in, dropped off some stuff at an office. We were over there at that area.
And what did you do when you left the West 117th area?
We got onto I-90 West and at 117th, and the traffic was fine at that point, and we were driving along the highway. When we got near the Lakewood exits, the traffic began to slow down.
And what did you observe next, Ms. Petri?
The traffic slowed down, I believe, into just a couple lanes, and I suddenly looked in the lane to my right, and I saw a trooper's hat on the cement in the street.
And what did you do once you saw that?
I told, I'm going to say Bryant, that's my fiance's son. I said to Bryant, "Oh my God, there's a hat in the street. Why is that there?"
And what happened next?
I was driving on the lane. Here's where the ramps would go off. I think third, maybe in. And the other lane, there was nobody in that lane by the cement middle area. And I looked to my left, and there was the trooper laying on the cement.
When you saw that, what did you do next?
Well, being a nurse and with my background, of course, I'm going to stop. The trooper had the paramedic at his side at that time, and he was checking the carotid pulse. So I quickly pulled over my white car, and I told Bryant to come with me, and I said, we have to help. So we got out, and I told the paramedic I was an RN. I said, how can I help? And he, he said, just come on over here. And I opened the trooper's shirt, and I was preparing to do CPR.
What happened next?
He continued to monitor the carotid pulse, and it was very weak, but we didn't start CPR yet. And then he began CPR instead of me, and that would make me do the airway. I wasn't able to deliver any breaths to the trooper because his airway was full of blood. His face, there was no way I could do it. And if there was a way, I would have done it. And I have done it in the past without back. He had a large amount of blood coming from his head onto the cement, and it was a very large amount. His arms were lacerated very deeply in a grating way, like this, like slits, like someone sliced. And those were oozing and dripping blood. His arms and his legs were all deformed because they were broken severely. He was unconscious and non-responsive.
What did you do next?
The squad had already been called because that's a question that I asked if someone called 911, and this was all happening very quickly. I stayed with the trooper. I couldn't do the respirations, so I decided that the best way that I could be utilized at this point was to stand back and begin to pray for him, because he had no family with him. He had no one there but the paramedic and myself. So I silently began to pray, and I asked my Bryant to pray with me for that trooper, that we would be with him as he was passing this world to the next. And that's what we did.
After you began doing that, after you began praying, what happened next?
It wasn't long before I could hear the siren. Your vehicle is smashed and there's a man dying on the road there. You have to know that you hit this person.
And what, if anything, was the defendant's response?
He kept telling me he doesn't know what happened.
In your time in speaking with the defendant, were you able to observe him and his demeanor?
I was. As a nurse, I'm trained that when I'm talking to you, I'm also doing an assessment. Continue?
Yes. Did you observe his demeanor? What did you see?
What I saw was his eyes were very strange looking to me and wild looking.
What do you mean by that?
His pupils were very small, and he just was looking at me in a very strange manner, and it didn't look normal to me, like normal pupils.
Did you make any other observations of the defendant?
I did. For someone that had just been in an accident like that, I felt that he was kind of a flat affect.
After making your observations of the defendant, what did you do next?
I asked him point blank, I said, "What are you on? You look like you're on something. Are you taking drugs?" He said, "No."
Now, Ms. Petri, what made you ask that question?
Because of the way his eyes looked and the way that he was acting.
And after you received that answer, what happened next?
Then I said, "Are you drinking? Have you been drinking?"
And was there a response to that question?
He said, "No, I have not been drinking."
Now, Ms. Petri, are you law enforcement of any kind?
No.
At that point in time, had official law enforcement responded to the scene?
They were beginning to come and come to the scene.
Had you spoken to anyone from law enforcement at that time?
Not at that time. This was private between him and I.
What happened next?
I felt that, we needed to pray for him too, because this is a life-changing event for everybody involved, and it's so huge. So another person at the scene came, and I said, we need to pray for this guy because he needs all the prayers he can get to. So we prayed for him.
Did law enforcement eventually respond to the scene?
They did in force.
When they responded to the scene, what were your observations of this point in time?
Well, when they came to the scene, they came in force, as I said. Each group, the police department, the fire department, and the squads circled the scene. It was really amazing to see. And they came in force, and the paramedics came, not just one group of paramedics, but many. So that's what I witnessed, and they came and they began to do their job, and they began to secure the scene.
What did you observe next?
At that point, the police were kind of corralling some of us in a way, like getting us to a safe place. They shut down the exits, so the traffic that had been going by and observing all this was now gone. And they wanted to prepare us to tell them what we saw.
Now, Ms. Petri, did you provide law enforcement with a written statement?
I don't recall it.
Did you provide your name and information to law enforcement?
I did.
After you provided your name and information to law enforcement on the scene, what did you do next?
We had to stay there for a long time because it was, we were totally walled in. So we stayed until they felt that they had, we had answered their questions, and then they let us go one by one.
After that, prior to being here for trial, did you have any other contact with law enforcement officials related to this incident?
No, I haven't.
One moment, please, Ron.
Yes.
Nothing further at this time, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Hello.
My name is John Sin, and I'm going to ask you some questions. If I ask anything you don't understand, you can ask me to repeat it. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. You work at Eaton World Healthcare?
Eaton World Headquarters.
Okay, what is that?
It's power everywhere throughout the world. They make different parts for airplanes, different things like that. Power.
What do you do for them?
I'm their health center manager.
Okay, what does that entail?
Well, they have many employees throughout Cleveland and the surrounding areas. So we provide their physicians for them and their family, so they don't have to leave work to go to the doctor, take a full day off. They could just come down and get whatever care they need. We do all their physicals. We also do a very aggressive travel medicine program because they are international travelers. So I run that center and manage that day-to-day operations and the accreditation part of it.
Okay. And you are a nurse for most of your life?
Yes, sir.
And you went to nursing school?
Yes, sir.
When did you do that?
When did I go to nursing school?
Well, what kind of school do you have to go to be a nurse?
Well, you can do it many different ways, but back in the day. But now it's mostly through college, a 2-year or a 4-year.
How'd you do it?
I did it through a 2-year, and I'm still in school today. I'm finishing my BSN. I'm almost done now.
Okay. So you've got a 2-year degree in nursing, and you're working on what's a BSN stand for?
It's a bachelor's.
Okay. So you've got some medical training, plus you have a lot of on-the-job training.
I do.
Okay. But you wouldn't call yourself a doctor, right?
No, I'm a registered nurse.
Okay, or a toxologist or a pharmacologist or any of those type of things?
No.
You're just a good Samaritan and a nurse who tried to help somebody out that day?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I understand that. You indicated that you had some contact with my client, right?
Yes,
And you thought his effect was kind of flat.
I did.
And you thought he had wild eyes.
I did.
What do wild eyes mean?
The eyes didn't look like someone like any of us. They looked like he was on something.
Okay. Are you familiar with the folks who are in shock?
Yes, I am.
Okay, there are two kinds of shock, aren't there?
Yes.
And there's an emotional shock.
Mm-hmm.
And you're aware that sometimes folks under emotional shock can have that haunted look. Would you disagree with me on that?
It's possible.
Okay. And sometimes we can't really judge their emotions or their effects because they're in shock. Is that true?
It can be.
Okay. You made an assumption that my client was on something, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Would it surprise you to learn that he had a blood test later that day?
I hope he did.
Okay. Would you be surprised to learn that the only thing in his blood was his prescription medication?
Objection, Your Honor.
You can repeat that.
Would it surprise you to know that the only thing in my client's blood was his doctor-prescribed and doctor-administered prescription medication?
No, it doesn't surprise me.
Okay. So it's possible maybe that your initial feeling that he's on something could just be attributed to a young guy who just got into the worst accident a person could possibly imagine. Is that possible?
It could be.
You're not saying that you have some powers that a blood test doesn't, right?
No.
Okay. I mean, if the fact that you saw wild eyes and a flat affect on a guy who had just been involved in a fatality. Let me ask you this. When you were with my client, how far away was the trooper from my client? 10 feet, 20 feet?
Well, at what time? Because he did move around.
When you had the closest contact with my client, when you were in the closest contact with him, how close was he to the trooper?
I'm not really good at measuring feet. Maybe I'll try to gauge it from this room, maybe. If this is the trooper, he would be maybe towards the back where people are sitting, but I walked over to him.
Okay. And it's pretty clear that the trooper was in tremendous distress, right?
Even worse.
Even worse. I mean, he had open lacerations and disfigured hands and arms, correct?
A massive head injury,
Okay.
yes.
Now, as a person with your vast experience, these types of situations, I don't want to say they're commonplace for you, but this isn't your first rodeo when it comes to things like this, is it?
No, sir.
Okay. But to my client, who's not in medicine, who's never been in an accident like that, do you think it's fair to judge him or his effect by his...
Objection, Your Honor.
Do you think it's fair to judge him by to hold him to the same kind of standard we might hold someone like you who's got all this medical background?
No, and I really wasn't holding him to that standard. It was my observation. It stuck out very clear to me. And, you know, usually, like when that adrenaline gets going for fight or flight, the pupils dilate. So for me, it was odd.
Because the pupils were not dilated?
They looked very small.
Constricted.
Which made it look wild, like just wild looking.
So wild doesn't necessarily mean he was doing anything crazy with them, like bugging them out or blinking them real fast. It just means that the pupils were constricted.
The eyes looked very strange.
Okay. Are you aware that one of the main side effects of prescription methadone when given in its therapeutic range is constricted pupils?
Yes, I know that.
So we would expect somebody who's taking a prescription medication to show that type of constriction.
Well, I'm not a doctor, but yeah, it's possible.
And again, we should probably defer to the doctor on that one. You agree with me?
I suppose. I'm just stating what I saw.
I appreciate that, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Ms. Petri, you were just asked about if you're familiar with how a side effect of prescription methadone. Can you call that question?
Yes.
Are you aware of some of the side effects of prescription methadone based on your training experience?
Somewhat, yes.
Can you share with us what some of what you are aware of is as it relates to prescription methadone?
Good check for lack of foundation.
You brought up the topic.
I just,
You may answer. No. First place, ma'am, do you know anything about methadone in relation to this case?
I know some things about methadone, but you mean in relation to him over there? Well, he just told me that your client was on methadone, so I know that. But I didn't know that at the time when I approached him.
Can you tell me what you know about prescription methadone?
Yes, I'm not an expert, of course, but I do know that methadone is used for people that have addiction. Sometimes I think it's heroin, or I believe that's what it's for, and people go on a daily basis to receive their dose. It can constrict pupils. It can cause you to slow down, feel better with your addiction and the cravings and that. There could be some constipation related to that, like opioids. That's about what I know about it.
And so, when you're talking about how the defendant's eyes appear to you, what was that based on?
It was based on my nursing assessment skills. When I looked at him, his eyes did not look normal to me. And that's why I asked if he had been taking drugs or was drinking.
And you were asked on cross-examination about your observations of the defendant. You said something about fight or flight response in the pupils. Can you explain that to us, please?
Well, that's something that occurs when something very startling happens, like an emergency or something scary. Adrenaline is released in our body, and we're ready to fight or flight, which means we're ready to fight and our pupils dilate and we can see good, or we're ready to run as fast as we can. So in circumstances like that, I was just a little surprised that the pupils were looking the way they did, and the eyes looked odd to me.
You were also asked about whether or not you had any experience with individuals in a state of shock. Do you recall that question?
Yes.
And in your experience of dealing with individuals in a state of shock, how do they typically respond?
Well, people can respond in different ways that I've seen. I've been in the emergency room where people come in with their baby dead in their arms and they're screaming, they're crying, they're going crazy, they're pounding walls. I know people respond all differently. I understand that. But, I've also seen people in shock when, it's a medical emergency and they're not saying anything because they are on the ground or losing blood or needing IV fluids. They don't have a blood pressure. They're not able to respond in any way. But from my experience, those are the things I've seen.
And even with that experience, something about the defendant's demeanor drew your attention, correct?
It did.
And what were those things that, even with that experience, still drew your attention and made you ask those questions?
It seemed like he was not taking in what really had just happened. There was no crying, no I'm sorry, oh my God, there was none of that. And he did ask me if that trooper was going to live.
Thank you. One moment, please, Your Honor. Nothing further, Your Honor.
maybe you have some familiarity with the medication methadone?
some, not a lot.
Okay. You're aware that it's not just for heroin addiction, it's also a medicine that's given for folks who become addicted to pain pills.
Yes, I know about opioids.
Okay. And the idea behind it is that it stops the cravings for those opioids, and like you said, it's given in a doctor's office, and is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. But you didn't know at the time, when you were observing my client, that he was engaged in methadone treatment, did you?
No.
So when you saw his wild eyes, naturally you would assume that maybe he's on something. But had you known he was on methadone, that would have been your explanation. Agreed?
Yes, it would have been nice if he would have told me.
Right. But he had kind of a lot on his plate right then himself, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to stop here. So thanks for your attention today. If you're downstairs tomorrow at 9, it's our Friday special. I don't think we have any other civil or criminal matters set, so we should be able to go forward. Keep in mind, enjoy your evening. The Indians did win. You stole my byline here. Sorry. Anyway, don't talk about the case law. I want to talk to you about the case on form express any opinion. We are far from that. No independent investigation, no media accounts. We do have a wonderful evening. Enjoy the fact that it's still summer and we have a lot more things to do than we might have to do outside in the winter. Thanks.
All rise.
I'm going to bring your hat.
I'll take care of it now, folks. Good night. Good night.
Right, this your signal when I have this on. You know,
Good night. Good night. Have a nice evening.
You can start. You can start.
Good night. Have a nice evening. Thank you. Good night. Thank you. Have a nice evening.
all of us was better today.
Thank you.
You didn't need your blanket.
Thank you, Lynn.
Anything else before we adjourn?
Sidebar?